England versus Australia at Twickenham in 2024 made history, as it marked the first of many, many opportunities for us to bask in Sean Maloney losing his mind, going ballistic at Max Jorgensen, running half the length of the pitch to score a winning try and get the whole crowd on their feet. Last year, the meeting between England and the Wallabies at Twickenham was a belter. It was an incredibly evenly matched game. Granted, it wasn't perceived as that before the game. It was seen as something of a, not upset, but a surprise for the Wallabies to stand up in the way they did and to match England, let alone to go and beat them. However, this time round, we have seen a Wallabies that have come from the pits and entered the Schmitz. As another year under Joe's regime has seen a Wallabies team who can now just compete with anybody. I think that that's one way that I'd really characterise this team is no matter who they come up against, you always see them in the fight, whether or not they win the game. And they've obviously come up with a couple of statement wins this year, including, my apologies, just one win against Argentina, a win against the British and Irish Lions, and of course the famous win against the Springboks. This time round at Twickenham, it feels a little bit different, as England find themselves in that weird post-Lions tour haze where they've come off the back of, again, winning in Argentina themselves, and with a load of returning players who've had varying levels of game time at club level in the Premiership, it's difficult to know just how strong a foot they will get on in their first game of the autumn. I wouldn't be too surprised if there are certain bits of England's game that need to click a little bit. But on the flip side of that, Steve Borthwick's selection does kind of reflect this, as we have seen 6 British and Irish Lions named on their bench, something we will come on to later. Meanwhile, the Wallabies selection carries on a fair bit of momentum from the Rugby Championship. There are a couple of enforced changes, such as James Slipper's unfortunate eventual retirement, Tom Wright sadly being out injured at the expense of everybody who's watching Australia this autumn, and of course Lenny Katow is still unavailable. That is again something we will touch upon slightly later on. Arguably the best centre in the world, a lot of people are saying that at the moment, and I find it quite hard to disagree. But I think the place to start is up front. Both packs seem to have this weird, almost oxymoronic blend of power and weight, but also sheer dynamism and athleticism in there. Unfortunately, no Will Skelton for Australia. Good to see him miss out. However, instead in his place, up steps Jeremy Williams alongside Nick Frost. Both of these have had brilliant years, frankly. Williams was one of the standout players against England in this fixture last year, and once again he had a brilliant game against Japan, disrupting the Japanese maul here, getting straight through the middle and managing to win the ball back for Australia. If you're not too familiar with Jeremy Williams and wondering why he's in this team, this is one of the many, many things that he brings. And against a team like England, who are known to have a very strong and consistent maul, just generally excellent at line-out time, that is one of the many, many strings to his bow. Granted, the Australian lineup wasn't perfect against Japan. They had a few cough-ups of ball. Additionally, for the Wallabies, you have to look at a lot of the ball-carrying threats they have around their pack. You're looking at the likes of Angus Bell, Rob Valentini, Harry Wilson, Taniela Tupou also in there. These are really dynamic carriers. Again, we've talked about this a lot on the channel before, but Angus Bell loves just getting kind of loose carries in a way. He loves just finding weak half shoulders and breezing past those and getting into open country and offloading off the back of that. And again, that is clearly something that Borthwick has premeditated in the selection of his back row. He has Guy Pepper, who is one of the most dynamic back rows in the Premiership, as we saw at the end of that test against Argentina in the summer. We've seen Ben Earl, who obviously has played a little bit of rugby at centre. He's really quick. He's insanely explosive off the ground. And of course, most of all, you have Sam Underhill. Underhill is known for the chop tackle. That is kind of his speciality, as well as running those hard lines in attack. But also he's a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to the breakdown work. Not only is he one of the most dominant players on his own ball, but on opposition ball, he is very good at both blasting and jackling. He's one of those who's kind of equally good at both. But as well as just sheer brute force and carrying, the thing you have to look out for the most from this Wallabies team is the level of deception they bring when it comes to playing to the edge and some of the decisions they make around there. Now, they have Jake Gordon and Tain Edmed as their halfbacks for this game. Both excellent decision makers, the pair of them, but they're also two players who love to play to blind sides. As Japan kick to Australia here, Dylan Peach does a great job of regathering the ball, and Australia, in the first 14 phases of their attack, do not go further than 20 metres from the touchline. That sounds quite risky, but it's clearly deliberate. They're looking to tire out the same few Japanese tacklers and make them come off the line constantly. Now, it's a bit of a theme in modern rugby that in attacking to blindside, you'll often find weak shoulders because it's quite difficult to fly both sides of a breakdown off the line. That typically will find a bit of a gap from where the breakdown originated from. Also, some players typically have to fold around there to try and fill more numbers out wide. So at that point, it becomes quite difficult to make decisions on whether everybody's just flying up the line or whether you're going to sacrifice somebody to fold in behind that breakdown to anticipate another phase on the open side. However, Australia here, by going to the blind side, are fatiguing the same few tacklers over and over again, making them make constant tackles. It's a really nice tactic here. It stinks of Schmidt, this. They get a penalty advantage off the back of this because Japan fly up offside, because again, it's hard to set your line speed in a situation like this. Australia kick to the corner, Carlo Tizzano scores. They also ran the shape twice in the early stages against New Zealand in that second test in the Rugby Championship. As soon as they get the ball to Dungunu on the edge, they look to keep the ball squeezed in this area and to really stress those All Blacks tacklers, working back to the blind side after one phase and Harry Wilson making a break down the edge. Once again, here, Len Ikitau flings the ball over the top and they're immediately on the front foot. That's an important part of this. If they're on the back foot, it's a pointless tactic to run because the opposition will just constantly fly up off the line and they are ready for you. If you're on the front foot, they have to second guess whether they're coming up or whether they're drifting and giving you a little bit of space to run in. This one's a little bit different though because they do actually play off 10 here. They do play off Edmed. But interestingly, Edmed just gives a 1 metre pass here. Usually as a 10, you would ask your forward to set sort of 5 or 6 metres off you, if not further, to try and punch larger holes in the defence where they'll be a little bit more spread out. But instead here, he just goes for a very simple pop pass to Wilson, just again, trying to overwork the same All Black defenders, wanting them to double job, wanting them to try and go an extra 5 metres on top of what they usually would when they're coming up in the defensive line. And again, in true Joe Schmidt fashion, they are so quick to set shape again off this. They go straight to the blind side, no hesitation. Suat Aliti in the boot. Potter makes a break down the edge. He very nearly scores from this, and a few phases later, Alan Alatoa crosses only for it to, albeit, get chalked off. This tactic isn't new to Schmidt's Australia. Jeremy Williams actually scored against England in this fixture last year from a very similar shape of them just attacking the same few channels over and over again. And I'll be really interested to see how England deal with this because they've got to see it coming. Presumably they will have a plan for either Alex Mitchell or Tommy Freeman to be watching this position. Presumably Mitchell, because I presume they'll be wanting Tommy Freeman to cover a little bit more space in defence, especially because there are so many players in that Australia team who love that long ball over the top. Tommy Freeman's one of the fastest players in this team, especially off the ball, and so whilst that ball is in the air, he will want to cover that ground. So maybe they will be using Mitchell on this blind side to cover that area and to be that third centre, so to speak. We've talked about the attack. We've talked about the physicality, the brute force of the packs up front. But I have to say, none of those are the most exciting, most anticipated part of this game. Because despite what your dad's going to tell you 7 minutes into the game when England stick up their 9th kick in a row, the most exciting part of this match is the kicking game. I loved reading Steve Borthwick's team almost as he probably loved naming it. He loves naming squads. Because there is absolutely no subtlety. There is no disguising the game plan they're going to play. You've got George Ford at 10, the purveyor of the spiral bomb. You have Tommy Freeman at 13, a man whose credentials are getting selected for the Lions tour partially, not entirely, but largely revolved around his expertise in the air, as well as his aforementioned speed. You have Tom Roebuck on the wing, the best aerial winger in the Premiership, frankly, like one of the most underrated aerial wingers in the world. And at fullback, you have Freddie Stewart, the man who is known to be the Sky King, who is known for his high ball prowess. And as such, it means that some big names like Marcus Smith and Henry Slade are missing out because they clearly want to home in on this game plan. No surprises for guessing. What I anticipate England are going to do is stick it in the air constantly. Honestly, I bet in training this week, Alex Mitchell has only passed to George Ford. He's otherwise just been going, right, one up carry, I will stick it in the air, or Ford, he's going to do exactly the same thing because there are so many high ball threats in that back line. And the other exciting thing is, we mentioned the back row beforehand, all three of those, Pepper, Earl, Underhill, are brilliant at the blast at breakdown time. Now, these two things are so heavily interlinked because the hardest bit of recovering from crossfield bombs, which again, George Ford is excellent at, isn't just the catch of the ball. It's knitting everything around that. So as often a 7, sometimes there's a 13 as well. Some of the hardest work you have to do on a rugby pitch is working back and getting onside in this position, especially now under the new kicking laws that you're not allowed to block people, to buy your winger or fullback a little bit of extra time to stay on their feet and get their groundwork right. Instead, players have to work all the way back, get behind them, get through the gate and arrive in a legal position, because otherwise refs are really, really hot on this. And England have clearly picked their back row with this in mind, trying to take advantage of this. Because, let's say, the likes of Potter, Kellaway and Jorgensen are fielding these bombs every single time, you can expect the likes of Faye, Waboso and Roebuck will be making big hits, trying to land on top of their opposition player and have these back row players arrive early to put a bit of pressure on, get Australia on the back foot before they kick back. If not, win turnovers themselves. I'd imagine the kind of kick that Ford will most be looking for is something a bit like this, where he puts it into kind of dead space. It's not quite the front line, but it's not quite the backfield. And nobody on the Welsh team claims it. It bounces horribly, which rugby balls famously do. And the flip side of this is Australia have at 13, Joseph Akuso Suali'i, who is an excellent fullback himself, is unreal under the high ball. Is one of those kinds of players. But as any rugby coach will tell you, you always want somebody coming forward onto the ball to be taking those high balls. Again, this really favours the attack when you've got the likes of Roebuck and Stewart, who won't necessarily even be staying on their wings. You know, they'll be swapping around with Tommy Freeman at times and getting into positions where they can get under the ball as appropriate. And the skill of getting in the air is something that massively just favours somebody who's coming forward onto the ball as it is. You have to get your hands in the air in a point where potentially they're in the eye line of the opposite player who's trying to catch the ball. You want to put them off a little bit. You ideally want your knee to get in the air higher than the opposition player does. Again, as a player coming onto the ball, you can watch it sailing all this way because people aren't allowed to block you anymore, so you don't have to spend as much time actively not running into people. Whereas as an opposition, especially with the type of kicks that George Ford has been putting in, sometimes that ball is flying over your head and it will fly behind you. You have to try and take it like that above your head. Opens up the rib cage, opens up these opportunities for those blast breakdowns we were just on about. However, England aren't the only team with a huge kicking weapon in their arsenal, as 2025 has seen some genuinely outstanding form from the right boot of Jake Gordon, Australia's scrum half. Now, the axis between Gordon and Edmed is very different from the one that we've seen between Gordon and Liner. Against Japan, only kicked once from structured phase play. He had one which he booted straight from a kick-off, fine. Obviously had a lot of penalties and free kicks and so on, which he kicked from. A couple in kicking battles from the backfield and 1 or 2 on first phase. But only once during structured play did he look up and go, I've spotted space, I'm going to kick this on my own terms. Instead, Australia, and again, this is not a criticism of Edmed, this is more just the way that international rugby is going at the moment, that you can have a 10 who doesn't really kick the ball in a game as long as you've got a 9 and somebody else in the back line who brings that kicking game. And Australia have both Edmed and Hunter Paisami who are really good at just those, as I say, kicks into space when it opens up, I guess, spontaneously. But in Jake Gordon, they cover all other bases. I'm just going to play a few clips over the top of this of Jake Gordon got either a huge clearing kick in or a brilliant contestable which gave his winger a real opportunity. This one in particular I absolutely love. Australia don't even win this back, but they do force Japan to risk running a blocking line here. It obviously goes unpenalised, which is fine, it happens in games, but it forces Japan to bring the referee into the game to make a decision or to not make a decision. And 50% of the time that might go their way. They're getting a penalty they can kick into the corner and get a line out to potentially score off. In the second test against the Lions as well, Gordon was absolutely brilliant. He was the best player on the pitch for me. He not only put in 1 or 2, again, monstrous clearing kicks, but on 2 occasions, he put the ball within inches of the touchline. On this one, James Lowe is forced to throw an offload or else he's probably getting held up, and Jameson Gibson-Park is forced into touch. And on this one, he lands it an inch from the touchline. Australia keep it in and they charge up to the 22. If either team slacks in the backfield or falls asleep for half a second even, we could be seeing some huge opportunities being opened up. I would imagine both teams will actually get a lot of possession in the opposition territory because, again, if you buy a lot of tickets, you're more likely to win the lottery. Additionally as well, I mentioned him briefly a minute ago, but Hunter Paisami, brilliant kicking game on him, really underrated at this. I think he's one of those players that a lot of people saw how many big hits he makes and assumed he was a crash ball centre. But actually he's kind of the opposite. He has so many deft little touches and his kicking game is absolutely outstanding. This one that he put on early on against Japan is brilliant. He finds a load of dead space. Fluke manages to put some pressure on. Australia get a penalty, which they score off not long afterwards. And frankly, that battle between Fraser Dingwall and Hunter Paisami is one of the bits I'm most excited for about this game. Fraser Dingwall really deserves his opportunity. Defensively, he is known to be absolutely brilliant. He is kind of the key leader, both in defence and attack for Northampton Saints. He is known as one of the players in England who talks the most out of everybody, so that's really important. Again, he works as a distributor. You look at this touch he put in the Champions Cup semi-final to put James Ram over for a try, just slipping into the boot and very quickly flinging it over the top. He can clearly read an attack in a split second. But then on the flip side of that, once again, Len Ikitau is out. And so Hunter Paisami is, I guess, the next best thing they can come up with in this scenario. Australia, when they have Ikitau at 12, they quite like to play off 12 because if you get the ball into Ikitau's hands, his body language is so impossible to read. You want him to get as many touches on the ball as possible because defences have to adapt to him on the fly. Paisami is quite similar. Granted, maybe not to the absolute world-beating standard of Ikitau, but he's so excellent at this. Josh Fluke's try against Japan, they play off Paisami and he lifts this ball brilliantly to Edmed out the back. Dylan Riley and Tomoki Asada don't connect particularly well for Japan here, and Andrew Kellaway exploits this by running a lovely line. Riley goes instead to block Dylan Peach and to stop him from joining the attack, which is kind of smart, but again, Andrew Kellaway in a 1v1 is often quite successful and will get you a lot of cheap yards because he's very strong and he's incredibly quick. So he breaks the tackle, and with Peach lacking, Fluke stays alive to take the offload on the inside to score. There's a lot of options you can run off Paisami here. This is going back a few years, but against Wales here, they again play off 12 and he sticks the kick in behind for Andrew Kellaway to score off. These little deft touches on the ball are what he really brings to this attack. And again, that battle between him and Dingwall, a man who makes little to no errors, frankly, is really, really exciting in that 12 channel. And little kicks like that one Paisami did just there will come so in handy against England's blitz defence because they are so aggressive when they come off the line. I guess the final thing to discuss is the two teams' respective benches. And with this in mind, I would slightly favour England because on the England bench, you're looking, again, at 6 British and Irish Lions. You're looking at Luke Cowan-Dickey, Ellis Genge, Will Stewart, Tom Curry, Henry Pollock and Finn Smith. That is an absolutely stacked bench. And Ben Spencer and Alex Coles are also two brilliant players who are quite well proven at international level. The Australian bench, I would say, lacks a little bit of experience. You've got the likes of Nick Champion de Cresney, who stepped up well. Clearly you don't lose anything when you bring him on, even if it is for 3 world-class back rowers. But the one red flag I would say for Australia is at halfback, where Ryan Lonergan, who is a brilliant player, I really like Ryan Lonergan, and Hamish Stewart, both against Japan, were unused substitutes. They were not trusted to come on and see the game out, which unfortunately doesn't quite fill you with confidence if you maybe got 5 minutes left on the clock, you're a point behind, and you need somebody to come on and steal the game for you and really grab it. Both of them are new to international rugby, and I would hope for Australia's long-term sake they get a fair few minutes because, again, Lonergan is a player with an excellent kicking game, and Stewart, again, is a sort of player who can stake a claim to get a start at some point in this autumn. It is a really exciting game. Both teams are not just evenly matched in terms of quality, but in terms of some of the qualities that they bring. Both of them having pressurised kicking games of different sorts. England having the bombs that they will no doubt be sticking in the air constantly. Australia having that short kicking game, which potentially poses a different threat. And I guess the thing to end on here is these structures are put in place to create unstructured scenarios off the back of those. So the likes of Manifeu Waboso, who we've barely talked about, but thrives when he's given a bit of space against a bit of a flagging defence. The likes of Joseph Arcuso Sua'ali'i, who is outstanding in those scenarios. We are yet to mention Harry Potter on the wing for Australia, no doubt selected as a seeker to go after Gordon's kicks and to get deflections for the likes of Valentini to pick up scraps off. I cannot wait for this game. I feel like the first kick, the first scrum and the first maul will tell you so much about what's to come. And yet, the one thing to expect from this game is always the unexpected.